Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is Frostbite. The date, December 7th, 1941. We know it as the date that will live in infamy. I want you to think about the events of that day, where we've been, and the fact that it has been 70 years from that date that we would experience another event like this. So think about it. It was a Sunday, 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun was cresting over the leeward side of the island, a balmy 72 degrees. The officers were joining up at the golf course to play around a golf. Couple admirals, couple generals had got together. We're talking about the business of the week, plans, exercises that they had, strategic initiatives, talking about the war that was being held in Europe. The sailors joining in the chow hall, eating their fill, laughing about the previous night's expectations, the events of the coming week, preparing for their final day of liberty. General chit chat. At this point, not really a care in the world. Many sailors were still sleeping in the berthing, unaware that breakfast was even being served. Coming off a late night watch or out dancing all night with the hot night on the town. 6:10, minesweeper USS Condor sights something in the water. Radios it in. Hey, we think we just saw a periscope. Not sure what it is. It's bobbing up and down. We're going to seek. We're going to identify. We'll call into the USS Ward. At the same time this is occurring, the first wave of airplanes have taken off from the Japanese aircraft carriers, approximately 200 nautical miles north of Oahu. A mere 25 minutes later, the USS Ward gets confirmation that there is, in fact, an enemy submarine in the water and begins to pursue. At 6:45 in the morning, coded message sent to headquarters. Enemy sub sunk. Entrance, Pearl Harbor. Now, you think they would have that information immediately, but no, they didn't, because it was encoded, and it would take a while for that message to become encoded at headquarters. The radar station picks up a blip on radar, 7:20. Notification comes through. Lieutenant finally walks over and says, well, it's probably our boys. We got a bunch of B-17s coming in. They're not supposed to be here till about 10 o'clock, but our boys, they're probably eager to get home and see their women and have fun and have one before they have to kick off their normal duty week. I'm sure they're going to want to enjoy their weekend. They probably bumped up their speed a little bit, caught a little bit of that leeward breeze, and they're probably just arriving early. Unbeknownst to them, it wasn't our bombers. It was the Japanese attack force, and they were just about to reach the shores of Oahu. Their destination, Pearl Harbor. In particular, Ford Island and Battleship Row. Now, there were a number of instances, a number of elements that they needed to focus on and take out prior to getting there. Now, the attack force came in 3 units. The first unit would come in with the second unit from the northwest, and they would sweep in around the northeast side of the island. They would swing around down south and come in through the mouth and try to take out the first set of battle units, the USS Nevada, the USS Arizona, and the USS Utah, located by the first group here. The second group would stay high north and they were carrying bombs, and they would focus on the second set, the USS Arizona, the USS Oklahoma, and the USS Maryland. They would also have bombers head towards Hickam Field and hit the oil refineries and the oil stations near Subbase, Westlock, and the NAVSTAY. From the west, another group of Zeros would come in carrying 20 millimeter cannons and providing air support, carrying small bombs. And they would hit Hickam Field as well as focus on the planes that were located on Ford Island. They had a plan. In 5 minutes from the time they reached the shore, there was silence. Peace. What you expect from Hawaii. Beautiful, calm, mellow shores.
General quarters, all hands man your battle station.
What's going on? Where's the drill? Wait, they didn't say it was a drill. Anybody who's been in the military knows that when the alarm sounds, there's a sense of panic. Your heart rate goes up. The drills that you've done get put into action, but they didn't know why. They weren't under attack. I mean, really, they were at peace. The war was in Europe. What the hell was going on? Boom! What the hell was that? Shuddering of the ship. Oh my God, we're under attack. Massive, massive explosions. Shells rattle the side of the hull. The time, 7:55. If you live in the central time frame, the time is now. Pearl Harbor was under attack. Now, they didn't just attack Pearl Harbor. Coming from the leeward side of the island, they had to focus on Kaneohe. So the Army folks that were caring for the air support up at the north side of the island, they were hit. And in this image, you can't really see it because it's supposed to represent the shock wave of the blasts. But it's also the shock. There's a sailor standing here, partially dressed, a gentleman casually walking away from the plane because they're in shock. They don't know what's going on. They're not aware that they're under attack. What's happening? Remember, there was a very strategic plan, and they had made the determination to go to war. Nobody knew. It was a surprise. At 8:10, a massive explosion rocked the USS Arizona. It exploded. 1,200 people on board. We know some of the names of the people who won service medals on board the USS Arizona. A cook who was cast out and chastised because of the color of his skin. Pulled Burning Man out of bay, out of water. The USS Helm fires and sinks a second enemy sub near the harbor. There were more. Admiral Halsey wells out Find and destroy all enemy subs. This is in order. We are under attack. That coded message that I talked about earlier, yeah, the USS Ward, it just got uncoded. That lieutenant just realized that that plane of bombers still hadn't arrived. A lot of communication issues. If you serve in the military, you know that we drill and we drill hard. And it's because of this. If you see this image, you'll see the Arizona up in flames. But in the right-hand side, in the bottom side of that image, you see this gray hulk. It's a hull. And those little white dots on top of it, they're machinist mates and hull technicians cutting holes in the bottom of the ship to provide air support for the men who are trapped in the engine rooms. We forget that there were thousands of people affected by this. Now, the cost of the year for the Japanese was minimal. 353 airplanes were involved. 29 planes were lost in the attack. They lost 4 subs. Ultimately, they classified this a victory. The 3-pronged approach for this attack proved extremely beneficial. The aftermath, the United States had lost 2,404 people. One thousand 100. Sorry. 1,177 on board the Arizona alone. 68 innocent civilians not tied to this event. 64 Japanese military and only 1 prisoner taken. But here's a stat that you don't know. USS Arizona, USS Oklahoma, USS Utah. Oklahoma had a bomb dropped through the middle of her. You know what? She didn't stay down. Just like the pride of the American people. We're hard to sink. You know why I'm emotional right now? Our country is under attack. But we're under attack from within. Ladies and gentlemen, this was an unprovoked attack by a foreign military. This was a military excursion. And you know what? We bounced back as a people. We raised the California, the West Virginia, the Olagala, the Shaw, the Maryland, the Nevada, the Tennessee, the Pennsylvania, the Cason, the Downs, the Helm, the Helena, the Honolulu, the Raleigh, the Curtis, the Vestal. We were damaged. We were down, but we weren't out. One thing that Pearl Harbor taught us is that we can take a beating, but it doesn't mean we're out. They call the gentlemen and the women, the ladies, the children from that generation the greatest generation. Now, we have some good people now. We have some people who are dedicated to the way of life, dedicated to serve selflessly. But on that day, people sacrificed themselves to save others. 15 United States Medal of Honor recipients, a cook, a black man who wasn't allowed to eat with the rest of his crew, manned a gun, shot down a couple planes, pulled people out of burning structures, saved a number of lives. There were 15 Navy Cross recipients, or excuse me, 51 Navy Cross recipients. And by presidential decree, many, many years later, the Pearl Harbor Commemorative Medal was given to all military veterans in the attack. The Japanese stopped attacking around 9:50. Now, there were a couple other small skirmishes after the fact, but basically by 10 a.m., the attack on Pearl Harbor was over. But the aftermath was unrelenting. We were still trying to figure out what happened. The memo reached DC. Classification urgent. Air raid Pearl Harbor. This is not a drill. Would reach Washington, D.C. But there was a story, and I want to correct a little bit of funky history due to movies, that Admiral Yamamoto, who was a brilliant strategist, was against the war. And they made the statement that he was the one that said we might be awaking a sleeping giant. That actually is not correct. Historically, that comment came from Don McNeil of the Breakfast Club that had a CBC radio broadcast. And it was the day after. And his statement was this. And also, don't forget, sometimes you can strike a giant who is dozing momentarily. But when the giant is awakened, look out. Now, World War II was horrible. December 7th, a date that will forever live in infamy. But it's not the only date. September 11th is another key date. This was 70 years later that we would experience another attack where it brought our country together. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't always have to agree. We don't always have to get along. We don't always have to like the same stuff. But you know what? We can be kind. We can be gracious. We can be generous. And we can agree not to agree. I don't know if you guys have been to Pearl Harbor. I served there. My time in the Navy was served at Pearl Harbor. This is emotional for me because I saw it every day. I talked with survivors and I watched people be buried who had lived through it. I got to talk to a Japanese pilot who was there that day, who flew air support, and he wept as the person aboard the Arizona, who he had made a friend with, had passed. Our nations go to war. People don't. People can get along. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Frostbite. Take care.